Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be comparing basically everything you need to know, driving experience, potential with the old STI platform or the current STI platform that didn't upgrade to the next generation, and the next generation 2022 plus Subaru WRX, which is the VB WRX, the VB generation. So we're comparing VA, STI, VB WRX, and we're going to hit the important pieces. So we're going to talk about driving experience, stock to stock, and then we're going to talk about the potential of these vehicles, where you can take them, and why you might be considering one or the other. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. And if you guys do follow the channel, you'll know that I've had many WRXs, VA, and I'm obviously in the VB WRX right now. This is a 2022 WRX. It's still, for the most part, all functionally stock. And while I haven't owned an STI, I've spent quite a lot of time in the seat of an STI, as it's something that I found very important for the channel. Also, I think that one of the fun things about being part of the Subaru platform is, you know, built STIs seem to be the cream of the crop, or they once were the cream of the crop. So I've got a lot of driving time behind the EJ platform, but let's get into it. All right, stock to stock driving. This is something that I think is more important than people realize, because for most of us, we have these dreams of building cars, and some of us never end up fully being able to build them. Actually, it's a big portion of you guys that don't actually end up being able to do performance modification. You might do some aesthetic and cosmetic modification, but stock to stock driving experience, I think you'd be surprised. So they are very different cars in the way that they have the user experience. I think that different things add different things. I think the STI feels different because of the suspension, and I think that you feel a little bit more agile. I think the experience is a little bit more raw. Actually, it's probably a lot more raw. It is a lot stiffer. I think around cornering, you feel a little bit more like a sports car, but I have to say with the VB WRX, it's not something that is like night and day. We're talking about a slight improvement. I think that the transmission also makes you feel like you're driving a much more refined sports car with the STI transmission. I think there's a lot more confidence behind that transmission. I think it feels good to shift. But I think a lot of the other things are very similar. I think that the stock ECU mapping on the VB WRX, while not perfect, makes that car a little bit more fun to drive. It's got far better power delivery, torque characteristics, power band. I think the EJ succeeds better on the top end. The VB WRX succeeds far better on the low end. Second and third gear in the 2022 Plus WRX, far more fun than second and third gear in the STI. Honestly, they are not even comparable. And total power stock to stock, they're pretty equivalent. I think that with the right driver, most VB WRXs off the line or at a roll will outperform an STI, as long as we're not going over 70 miles an hour. I think at the top end, you start to bleed off a little bit against the STI, but we know from stock dyno numbers that those cars are putting down almost very similar numbers. So if you're comparing the two and you want a decision whether, you know, which you should buy, if you're comparing the two, I think that the driving experience is a very different experience. I think that the VB WRX offers a little bit more refinement. It offers a little bit better power delivery. I think honestly the VB WRX is a little bit more fun to drive, just because I think that the power delivery is so needed in this platform, and that's speaking from somebody that had a tuned Subaru for a while. I think that stock to stock, it just wins a little bit more. I think that the feeling of driving, like the actual, like if you are maintaining a steady state or alternating your speed just by a little bit, like you're driving in the woods in a preserve like I am right now, the STI is probably the better choice, because it's going to outperform in cornering. You're going to feel more agile. You're going to feel more planted. It wins on all of those things. And I think especially in a scenario where, let's say you're driving this car to enjoy it on the weekend and you are hitting, you know, some back roads, some backwoods, that type of thing, I think that the shifting experience in the STI is a more connected experience, and you feel a little bit more connected to the car. With that said, you might just be a little bit slower, as you know, if you're in the 30 to 60 mile an hour power band VB to STI. Now, potential, which is something that has always made the STI the outstanding choice between the WRX and obviously the STI. When you compared VA to VB, you know, some of the shortcomings were the transmission or the engine because it couldn't make as much power. Most of the other things like the brakes, the suspension, all of those things could be swapped minus the differential, which yes, does play, I don't want to let that be something that we don't consider in this case. But I think the VB has changed this comparison of what the aftermarket can deliver between these two cars. Because all of a sudden, the VB WRX makes far more power, far cheaper, far faster than the EJ platform could ever. Now that was always true with the WRX, but you always kind of capped out at 310, 315 wheel horsepower, and that was kind of the, there was another big investment after that, but after like 330 pound-feet of torque, you were kind of capped at the transmission. And then you were doing a transmission swap, and all of a sudden it just didn't make sense. You needed to have the STI. Now that has completely changed to a fairly large degree. We have now seen consistent VB WRXs with like something like $3,000 a part. You can probably get, away with a lot less, but cob access port, intake, cat back exhaust, maybe a J-pipe if you really want to go that far. We're seeing good numbers without even a J-pipe. Intercooler, we're seeing 360, 370. When you talk about adding ethanol into your tuning, the numbers get pretty ridiculous. The short answer though is, what used to cost you a significant amount of money, we're talking turbo upgrade on an STI platform, is now achievable with a couple grand and a tune on a VB WRX. Now, yes, this car is still a year and a half into development on the tuning side of the platform. We don't know what the maximums are with the STI transmission versus the WRX transmission, but all of a sudden we're holding significantly more power, and we know with a lot of these builds, they haven't even upgraded the clutch yet, so we really don't know. In fact, I would hazard to guess that until you're doing a serious build, the VB WRX might be the car of choice, and I'm not necessarily convinced that the STI has something over it, and maybe the only reason it does is because we have an aftermarket internal engine component community, let's say, IAG, like some of these companies that make, let's say, engine-based upgrades for the STI. That doesn't exist yet, or is just starting to become inception for the 2022 WRX. Once that becomes the case, all of a sudden we're in a different playing field, and the FA24 motor might be a significantly better competitor, among other things. You still have to do a lot of things to the VB WRX to catch up to the STI, again, on the transmission front, on the braking side, on the handling aspect, but for a daily driver, a set of really nice coilovers, a set of really nice brakes, all of a sudden you're getting there, right? The noticeable differences are getting smaller and smaller, and you start getting to the point where you really need a track situation to further differentiate the cars. If you deliver the power with better power delivery characteristics, a better torque curve, all of a sudden that car is much more fun in a daily driving situation. So while I'm trying to avoid specific quotes of numbers and stuff because tunes are very independent to the tuner, especially with the STI platform, the modification journey and different ways you can go from different types of turbos to approaches and tuning, it is just, there's a lot to be said there. So I'm talking about the average situation. But yes, a lot of you guys are gonna roast me in the comments. Sure, you put 10 grand into the car, whatever it is. I'm just talking about where we can get with these cars, especially in the short term. The VB WRX is incredible, and I'm gonna leave you guys with just that, and I encourage you to start following some of the journeys and looking at some of the numbers of what people are making from popular tuners in the community, and just seeing the sheer gravity of those numbers with not a lot of modification. It is frankly incredible. And I'm gonna leave you guys with that because I don't wanna ramble too much more. We have a video in place working on doing actual 0 to 60 testing between these two cars, and hopefully going down to Mexico to do a race. I'm working on coordinating that. I also have a modified VB that is much further along the journey than my VB, going to do the same so you guys can see all of that in play. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Everything that I've talked about in this channel about stock to stock, tune to tune, I have now seen in person. I have seen many many VB WRXs, so actually many runs of VB WRXs that are stock against stock STIs, the VB was successful. Again, anecdotal because the spread of drivers there isn't a lot, so when you're racing these things, it's driver dependent, but I've seen the proof with my own eyes. So if you don't believe the numbers, which are clear, there is some anecdotal evidence that you can take with a grain of salt. So I will see you guys in the next video. I'm in a wooded area and I should be driving a lot faster than I am, but there's a car in front of me driving awfully slow, so I need to figure out what I'm gonna do. I'll see you guys in the next video.